heybk with Ofer Cohen.
People are starting to abandon Manhattan in its entirety and live entirely in Brooklyn.
AJ Pires and Della Valle traveled to the heybk studio from Dumbo, their home base since they started back in 2006. Welcome to heybk, AJ and Jared, principals of Alley Development. Had a horrible commute this morning to Prospect Heights. Tell us about it a little bit.
Getting here?
I had to sit next to AJ in the car. I was looking for a different experience rather than sitting across the table from him at work.
AJ and Jared finish each other's sentences and are clearly in sync. As you'll hear, the partners and co-founders of Alloy have a unique approach. AJ and Jared have taken on Brooklyn and made their mark throughout with responsible and thoughtful projects. You started as an architecture firm?
We got to the same place in a little bit different paths, and I went to architecture school to make buildings because I thought that's where you go to learn how to make buildings. And I got disillusioned pretty quickly from the way that field talks about their successes, which is often about, I achieved this from the client, or I was able to manipulate this and get this design done. And it was all about kind of leveraging design in a service model to get things done. And it just seemed very obvious, like, I don't want to be in the service profession. I want to be over there making the decision. I want to do this work. Like, I want to tackle the problems and do the design work. But, like, can't you do both? And through a mutual friend, through sheer luck, we were introduced. And Jared was, I think that's a thing. Architect, developer, we're like, that's a thing. And I was like, yeah, that's a thing. I've been studying that. I think, let's do the thing.
So together, they decided to do their thing, blending real estate and architecture. They formed an open office with a collaborative approach that considers both the design and overall impact on the city.
I think there's a kind of simple exercise, at least that I do in my own head, which is, okay, there's the opportunity, there's the site, there's going to be 13,000 decisions that need to be made to get to the end. At the end, like really at the end, 2 years after everything is done, when somebody describes the 3 sentences of what the project is and you stand across the street and point at it, what did it achieve, right? What is the opportunity in the dumbest, simplest of ways? And I think impact is increasingly becoming one of the key criteria and value sets. And the architecture of it, the beauty of it, is also for me continuing to be kind of one of the foundational principles of our site selection and project selection, which is, can we make something beautiful in the built environment? I don't know what you think.
Yeah, we're distorting the use of the word value in our practice. I think coming from an architectural lens, economics have never driven that industry. And, we are thinking about all of the alternative value sets and how to leverage our capacity with real estate to create alternative values like community connection or political opportunities or community benefits in general, right? And I think our projects need to be financeable, but at the same time, we're adding in this additional layer of criteria about alternative values that's super important to us.
While they only take on a few projects at a time, the bulk of their focus has been in Dumbo, and they both live in buildings they've designed and developed.
I think just knowing the place, right, and the ins and outs and who the people in your neighborhood are and what's happening on this corner and that corner, it's just, we have a lot of comfort in the risk because we feel like, okay, I understand this place.
I understand that Dumbo became more and more lucrative as an investment or a capital destination, but, do you still love Dumbo as much as you loved it in the greedy era? It was a little more intimate.
There were literally wild dogs there when I moved into the neighborhood, and my family moved there in 2001, 2002, and a little bit post-September 11th, we moved from Chelsea. And the most beautiful times in the neighborhood were like this time of year, February. There would not be a single car parked on the street. There'd be snow on the ground, and it was just like otherworldly. And I miss those moments of solitude in the neighborhood. But it was also completely starved, and with my family and committing to place and the resources, David and Jed have done an amazing job kind of curating the neighborhood, and we love being neighbors with them and participating and engaging in a thoughtful future, although we don't collaborate. I think we share a value set about what it is, and Regina and her work at the park, which has really kind of created a new neighborhood. So I feel ownership of the place, candidly, after this many years. And I think my wife and kids similarly are proud to have been part of the history of that place. And I love it, and I can never foresee moving from there. It's home.
I was in Fort Greene for 7 or 8 years before I moved to Dumbo, and my wife and I started our family in Fort Greene, and we did the strollers through the brownstone neighborhoods and going to the playgrounds, and that was difficult to leave, as Dumbo's a different neighborhood. It's more mixed use, there's more office space, and it's busier, right? There's more going on. There's tourism, and certainly with the park opened, it can be weekends there where it's really crowded, but it's also more exciting. And it's funny, as my kids get older, it's a little bit more aligned, right?
Yeah,
Because there's more stuff going on, right? And so, like everything, it changes. I'm sure 5 years from now, it'll be even different, and there'll be other, things we couldn't even imagine in the neighborhood. And, it's a physical form. The fact that it's constrained by the river and the infrastructure of the bridges will forever be there. And that is really one of the kind of remarkable and memorable moments of living in the neighborhood. And so I think that's, sustainable, obviously.
Their first big development was a loft conversion on Water Street. But as AJ and Jared expand beyond Dumbo, they have remained focused on what they describe as Northwest Brooklyn.
We have this quality of life thing, right? Like in 2008, 2009, our just being a developer and the architect started to expand into also being the real estate broker and also having a construction company. And so immediacy of the projects to our office became incredibly valuable to the culture and success of execution, which is we'll go to the job site twice a day, 3 times a day, between everybody in our office, maybe 5 times a day. And we're looking to make sure that we can execute quickly and really understand everything. And that market intimacy is hard to get a feel for in other places. And so, sometimes we even joke about it. It's like, this is a great site, and we'll be in Long Island City or something like that. And it's like, this is an amazing site, but man, that's going to take like 2.5 hours out of our day to come here. I don't want to do that. And there's a degree of selfishness with that.
There's also, though, we've always been very aligned, and I think everybody in the office is, about what we're doing and what the legacy is, which is, I always use the anecdote, like I kind of, 15, 20 years from now, I want to walk around and with my mom or my daughter and point at the 12 buildings we've done and be proud about each one. It's not about how much dollars we're making or ego in that way, right? It's about the legacy of the thing and the built environment and the impact that thing had to the people who live with it and use it and counter it and all of that. And so that does require the discipline of saying no, whatever that quote is, right? The success is defined by what you say no to is absolutely true for the model. And it is, sometimes it's, I'm not going to say, I don't second guess things where it's like, we could have done that and we would have done this and look at the, but.
Would you say that you have more moments of regretting not seizing an opportunity versus,
No, those are so rare. I mean, we're hardly reflective. I mean, everything is prospective. There's only maybe been 1 or 2 deals in our history where we're like, shit, that was stupid, where you lost for $50,000 and, a week on closing timing, where it was like,
right,
why didn't we do that? But when you look back,
at the time, there was a reason.
There was a reason.
Yeah.
And, we're so careful about it that it's not how I spend our time. I'm so proud of our work.
I get what you big picture proud of, but to the point about walking around Brooklyn and being proud of specific projects so far, what would be the thing?
I love them all.
No, I have to say, I think one John Street is recognizable and part of the Brooklyn skyline, and the amount of personal recognition and connection to our company has been kind of overwhelming. I hear it every day. I ride over the bridge and blah, 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 and I saw your building. It's the best building in Brooklyn. And, we get a lot of that from our architecture peer set, which is validating. Because there was this really uncomfortable moment when I was stopping producing, work for others where I had to actually say I quit architecture, right? And people were like, oh, so you don't care, and what's happening, and how's that going to go? Why'd you quit architecture, and why are you being a mean developer? and so our participation in the architectural community has been kind of important. One of the most rewarding moments of our career we had at a recent landmarks hearing where we were presenting 168 Plymouth, and the interim commissioner said, I don't think there's another owner or architect in the city who's had more of a positive impact on a neighborhood than you guys. And it was
awesome.
It was an incredible moment.
I started crying. Jared started crying.
It was really a moment of recognition, of feeling like the imprint and the subtlety and the small choices we're making and the execution and certainty of that outcome is recognizable as a place. And so for us, we walked out of that meeting like completely elated.
Recently, they've taken on a bigger challenge, a larger mixed-use project in one of downtown Brooklyn's busiest corridors on Flatbush Avenue.
Like all things, right, it was part intention and part luck and circumstance. We didn't acquire our first piece of property there with the intention to develop what we're currently developing. And so and that was 4 years ago now. And, the opportunity with the RFP that the city led to make public schools and to do just a much more complicated phased mixed-use development was just kind of too good to pass up, right? It was like, we get to do public infrastructure like schools, and there was a big affordable housing component, there's a cultural component that we added, and it was the same skill set that we applied, which is the project became a lot more complicated, three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle on an irregular site in a mixed context, and it required a lot of iteration and a lot of design thinking to come up with a plan that met a lot of criteria and kind of achieved what everybody was looking to achieve.
The complexity of that site and the political landscape and the sensitivity to the other neighborhoods was an incredible, complete mindfuck for a long time, And I think we enjoyed
I was going to say
the discussion. It was incredibly rewarding to have the 150 meetings we had and to think through the problems and to accept the community as our client and to think through what a successful outcome could be. It's a period of our history as a company that I'm exceptionally proud of.
Our work there is not done, and we won't be judged until that project is complete and we follow through on a lot of the, intent that we described, right? And that's always the case with development. You're spending most of the time, whether it's with your internal team or your partners or communities or whatever, talking about something that doesn't exist yet, right? And when it's done, the work is over to a certain extent. And so it'll be that judgment that will be the most, I think, rewarding 8 years from now or whenever that's going to be.
AJ and Jared create innovative designs. I went back to that initial question. What are they, architects or developers? When filling out forms, how do they describe themselves?
It is forum dependent. If I'm speaking publicly, which happens often, I say I make buildings. People understand that. That's the kind of most accurate version of it. If I'm, filling out a form that's like an application for something, it's usually architect first.
And if it's a line of credit,
and then
it's a real estate developer.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't fit into either of the kind of guilds, right? And we go to the architectural things, and although it's less happens now because I think people know us more, but people think we're real estate developers. You guys just want to make money, and you hate design, and And then we go to the real estate events, right? And it's like, you're just a fucking architect, and you just want to spend my money, and you don't understand anything, and you can't do math, and
that feels so lonely. You guys are.
We have each other.
That's why we embrace each other so often.
Yeah. But now, actually, we're spending more time, I think, trying to push on both fronts, which is the architectural practice needs more advocacy around ways to gain more agency in how things are made in the city. And, it's a tough service profession. It's incredibly difficult. And, both of us are on boards of organizations. We're trying to push on that front. And similarly, the real estate development community needs a lot of pushing relative to the ethics of what the responsibilities are of a developer. And, I think that's one of the things that is important to recognize that, as people recognize buildings, oh, that's a nice building. How'd you do that? Well, we should be trying to do our part to articulate that there are alternative paths, right? And
To set an example.
It's kind of like a combined DNA in a way. It's not like two different things that you're trying to melt together.
there are, it's funny. One of the things that has definitely happened in the past 10 years is we've noticed that there are more real estate development companies that have architectural practices in-house, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that is still church and state.
Correct.
And they have a division that's in-house. And to kind of the earliest point, like it is one conversation that is happening simultaneously around what is the value of that and can we build it, and is that legible to a broader market, and what's the impact, right? Like that, all of that stuff on the table at the same time is how we work, and that's, I think, possible for other people to get there through just accepting the criteria.
The connection to Brooklyn, I mean, can you see yourself doing this in any other town in
Nope.
the world, in America?
Not at all.
Nope.
Why?
We see a million opportunities, and people are always asking, would you develop here and would you develop there? And our business, again, is about taking risk, and it's like the intimacy and connection to place and the nuance about knowing that on this corner this is happening in 6 months. That's completely devoid, and not having a connection to the process of the making is also uninteresting.
But it's where I am and where you are, which is our kids are going to school here, and this is where we live, and so I want to invest my capital, right? Not my dollars, but like my industry capital, right, in affecting the place in which I live, right? Like it's to do it in suburban Cleveland, where I have no attachment is, what's the meaning of that?
But it's also the excitement and the value proposition of, the culture of this place, right? Like there is a collective spirit here. And, I share the value set. We can have disagreements about urban issues, but the value set.
What urban issues?
No urban issues.
There are no urban issues. This is an amazing place.
But, we can believe in a different future, right? And it's part of that spirit of place that I've really come to enjoy and appreciate, and a culture I like participating in, and I don't have that connection to any other place.
What would be one thing you would change about the city?
I think some of the social equity issues that come up as they relate to housing is an extraordinary challenge that people need to deal with more head on, and I think that's hard for our industry to do. We're both developers and perceived as rich white guys, right? And so the challenge of really connecting and being genuine about making meaningful change and how to participate in creating social equity opportunities is the thing I'd like to do most, and I don't know that everybody shares that value set all of the time. So that's more of a cultural shift, and I think it's obviously more present today, but I still don't know how many people take it on as a meaningful issue to address, and that's a hope for the future, call it.
I think the thing that I'm excited about, which I think is already happening, because I certainly see it amongst the people that I encounter, is people are starting to abandon Manhattan in its entirety and live entirely in Brooklyn. And they go to Manhattan to completely just do a pit stop at a cultural moment, right? It's not part of their life at all. And, they're raising their family here. Their kids are going to school here.
Yeah.
They eat out here. They work here. Right. It's just, and more I encounter, right, people where they're like, yeah, I never go to Manhattan. I don't know the last time I went there, right? And the more that happens, I think the more, not like there's not enough pride now in Brooklyn, but the more it just kind of starts to create its own real power of momentum. And that's what you're seeing in, big companies choosing to like move their entire offices to Brooklyn, right? And we've had, people who show up that are new to New York City as a whole, 5 boroughs, who are shopping for homes, and they're like, I'm just looking in Brooklyn. I'm actually not looking in Manhattan at all. I'm just looking here, right? And that's kind of amazing, right? Yes. And I think 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, right? It's not just that the center of gravity is shifting, it will be its own center of gravity,
So we typically end, if you listen to some of these shows, we typically end with this like awkward question.
Well, I think it's been weird that we're in our underwear this whole time. That's really strange.
I know. I typically ask, can you tell us something that nobody else knows about you? But I can ask it separately. I can ask it together.
I've been asking AJ this question for the last 13
Yeah.
years, and he's never told me anything new.
Yeah, we were trying to think of what to say to the answer to that question way over here, and it's like I'm tired of you. I know everything there is to know.
I think
Right.
people are always expecting us to sort of show some side of being just pure capitalist or something at the end of the day, right? But this shit is real to a degree.
Yeah.
I think we both really care about what it is that we're doing, and I don't know how to answer it any other way. The question is, there is no secrets. There is nothing that nobody doesn't know,
Right.
and we're prepared to share just about anything.
I play guitar, which I've been playing since I was a little kid, and I only play for myself. I like nobody ever hears me play guitar.
Seriously.
Yeah. It's like my one piece
Classic,
of Zen
acoustic.
therapy, like whatever, just like picking out
And
songs.
you've been doing
and
it
that
consistently.
for like 25 years.
You're so lucky. I was trying to get back into playing guitar because I played when I was a teenager,
Uh-huh.
but I haven't been able. This was last year. I haven't been able to really get back into it. It takes
Well,
discipline and time.
I would play with you, but I don't. I don't play with anybody.
So when do you have time to play?
Sometimes early in the morning, sometimes,
Ah.
at the end of the day.
You're so lucky.
Yeah.
That's amazing. See,
Something.
Jared. AJ actually had an answer for us.
I knew that already, but
Oh, you knew that? Yeah, I know. I get it.
he says that, but the real story there is that there was a night when
That's true.
when we
You did.
we were out and teaching in Syracuse that we were drunk enough that AJ was out and played live
I was on
in front of a
stage,
group of
actually.
people that we
Yeah.
didn't know. So,
But I was
Like,
not
yeah.
sober. I was not sober. It's true.
There you go. We found one secret.
Yeah.
Joint secret, actually. You're listening to Hey BK, the podcast about the people behind Brooklyn's transformation. You can find us at heybk.nyc or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Ofer Cohen. Thanks for listening.